Welcome, everybody. If you haven't signed in, do that for CURBS people. My name is Bryn Tolchinsky. Let's just do that. I'm currently working as a senior quality associate at Alanco. It's an animal health company based in Indiana. I was in this position as a CURBS ambassador and a CURBS director about 2 to 3 years ago. So I graduated from University of Florida in 2019 with my bachelor's degree in microbiology, and I did a combined degree, so I also got a master's degree in the same field in December of 2020. While at UF, I did a bunch of fun and exciting things, including undergraduate research. So I worked at the Emerging Pathogens Institute right near the Cancer Genetics Complex, working on the microbiology of this fancy species. I'm not going to even bother saying the name. Learned a lot through that lab. It really opened my eyes up to research in academia and, what can I apply that knowledge in industry? So I'm really grateful for that experience and my PI as well. On campus, I did a bunch of different things. I spent a lot of time in the microbiology department. I was a TA for the undergraduate microbiology lab that I'm sure some of you have taken or will be taking, as well as for virology, which is a microbiology elective. I also was on the CURBS executive board. I applied to CURBS as a junior, and I was an ambassador in the workshops committee. And then after that, I became a director of the workshops committee my senior year. I also thought my freshman year I was going to be pre-med, so I joined AMSA. What a better organization. And I stuck with it throughout my entire undergrad career. I, met a lot of great people through it, and I'm grateful for that opportunity too. I also spent a lot of time at Southwest. I worked in the weight room as a fitness supervisor, so I'm sure if you guys have been there, you might have seen me back in the day. What I've done in industry so far is just the beginning. I was an R&D intern in summer 2020 at the same company I'm at now. I was a virtual intern, unfortunately, so I was working at home in Fort Lauderdale, supporting the corporate site out in Greenfield, Indiana. I worked on the biopharmaceuticals research team. Then while I was finishing up my last semester of my master's degree, I decided to come back up to Gainesville and work at the Thermo Fisher site out in Alachua, not too far away from campus, because I really lacked that hands-on R&D experience that my internship would have provided to me. And I really, I wanted to make sure that I had an understanding of what that research and industry looks like. And then my current company hit me up back when I had started kind of at Thermo and I was in the middle of my last semester of my master's. And I knew I could not close the door on that company. And I got an offer at the manufacturing site on the west side of Indianapolis. And that's what led me to Alanco full time. I'm supporting fermentation science and product recovery. I'll get into that a little bit more as we get further along in the presentation. It is a pretty exciting field. It's a little bit different than being a hands-on laboratory scientist, but there's still a lot of impact that I'm able to make with my background. So we'll just get right into it. What are the differences that I've seen in academia versus industry? There's quite a lot. In my experience, academia is very, very, very specialized. So when you're looking at joining, you're an undergraduate student and you're looking at your options for joining different labs. You generally see, the publications of the PI, what the exact work that they're doing is, and it's usually like a long line and what exactly they're trying to accomplish. So it's a very specialized field and you're spending a lot of time and effort and relying on grant money to really accomplish and understand everything surrounding this very targeted specialization. In industry, you're working on so many different projects at all times. And if it's not you, someone else is working on it. There's so many people and so many areas that play a role in the business as a whole, and the portfolio itself. So you're never working on the same thing day in and day out, and every day is new and exciting. If you think about even our business at Alanco, we have two sides. We have a farm animal side, so products for swine and poultry, beef, aqua, etc. And we have the other side for dogs and cats. There are all different projects in the pipeline trying to develop new molecules, new innovative therapies, or even expanding upon our current existing products to be able to provide more to our patients and our end users. So there are every day different products, moving them forward into the pipeline to create and better serve our customers at the end of the day. In academia, it is a bit of a longer term if you think about it. So, you know, just from me and my experience, the people I worked with were postdocs, graduate students, PhD students, or people who are like associate professors. So generally, you know, once you get your PhD, if that's the route you go, you become a postdoc, and that's, you know, 4 or 5 years for a PhD, maybe a year or 2 for a postdoc. Then you want to get, you know, promoted into faculty recognition, build your way up in status to, you know, becoming a research professor, et cetera. So you're kind of in it for the long haul, and you're kind of staying in the same specialization generally throughout the whole time. In industry, there's no academic requirement really, mainly a bachelor's, sometimes a master's. If you have a PhD, that's awesome too. You don't even need a business degree. You can have a scientific background and apply that knowledge to the business. I think that's pretty exciting because for me, I have a microbiology degree, but I work, you know, some of my coworkers have the same degree or a bachelor's and work as a financial analyst. So it is really gives you a lot of flexibility. As long as you have that technical knowledge, you can build the business knowledge along the way. And in industry too, it's such a broad term. We see industry all the time. What does that even consist of? What are the different industries available? You have consumer goods, you have healthcare, pharmaceuticals, diagnostics, biotechnology, life sciences, environmental sustainability, et cetera. There's so many ways that people with STEM backgrounds can kind of make an impact, and so many opportunities, jobs, roles that you can provide that impact. And that's just the beginning. In academia, you have a small headcount and a small team size. Like I said, generally you're working with the same small group. You know, maybe it's undergrads, grad students, postdoc, PhD, PI. You see the same people kind of throughout your whole time there, and you know, occasionally you'll see new undergrads or new graduate students. But there's not really a lot of room to expand your team that much. A lot of it relies on publications and the grant money that you receive. In industry, I work with all sorts of people within my company, which is around 7,000 to 10,000 employees. And we even work externally with different auditors, different consultants, et cetera. So I work on a day-to-day with engineers, scientists, supply chain, quality control, quality assurance. There's so many different departments with people with different unique backgrounds that makes it really exciting. And we're always looking to really expand headcount as we try and blossom as a business and, you know, enter the market in more ways. Like I said, publications, grant money, years of schooling, PhD, if that's the route you want to go in academia. You know, it does take 4 to 5 years. You have to, you know, make a thesis, this and that. I got my degree, both degrees in 4.5 years, and I jumped right into industry. So it's a quicker experience, and I started making money right after that. So there's obviously a little difference in salary, but there's not really an academic requirement. If you're in academia, sometimes you have to teach as well. If you're in a PhD program, it's oftentimes a requirement to teach to undergraduate students, like a lab course or whatnot. I'm sure if you've been in a microbiome lab, your TA is a PhD student. And in industry, there is obviously a lot of money. Most companies are publicly traded companies. So if you think about the stock market, my company is a stock that's available for an investor to buy and contribute equity to. So a lot of the investors kind of dictate the decisions. Well, not necessarily dictate the decisions, but they have a sway over our market price, our market share, and that impacts us as employees, you know, with how much we're getting paid, our bonuses, et cetera. And they get to fly you out to places like this, and it's free, so that's cool. So there's definitely considerations if you were to think about jumping into industry. The main one, and we see it right now with the vaccine makers, is intellectual property. There's a whole section of law all around patent law and intellectual property. The fact that companies like mine are not able to share like our formulas, our kind of recipes for making our products, because it gets rid of the competitive nature of the business, and the fact that, you know, some vets might prefer our brand versus a different company's brand, or our product versus a different product, just because there are advantages and disadvantages to each product on the market and each company on the market. And that's what ensures that each company has their own profitable business at the end of the day, and is able to meet different customers' demands and have different specializations. So yeah, you are supporting a business at the end of the day. So sometimes as a research scientist, you really are excited about a project and the potential that it has. But if it's not something that's going to be able to be moved along in the regulatory process, or if it's something that just there's not enough money or headcount or even time devoted to it, it might be put on the back burner for a little bit. It also is dictated by the market and by the patients themselves. So, is there a gap that Alanco is not a part of? Like, are we not in the cancer space for dogs? We need to make sure our pipeline we're working on molecules to get to that point. Maybe the patients themselves are seeing an uptick in dermatology cases. What can our company do better to address that unmet need? Do we need to create another product? Do we need to change the formula of one of our existing products? So it's constantly adapting to really the economy. So it's kind of an interesting experience to think about how some of the decisions beyond us as a company really affect us as a company, and even boils down to my day-to-day work. Excuse me. There are limitations to scientific capabilities, kind of both in industry and academia. A lot of it comes down to money, time, or headcount, or even regulations. Even when you think about it, bringing a molecule or even a vaccine all the way from conceptualization into the arms of someone, it's a lot of money and time spent, just buying supplies, getting the headcount and the paying people overtime. There's so much that goes into it. And there's so much, you have to have clinical trial data from small groups to large populations and make the case, analyze the data. It is a lot of work, and those might be limitations at the end of the day if it's not a feasible scale-up process. Like I said, there's many areas to apply your knowledge. I have folks that I work with who have, the STEM background, but work in R&D, portfolio analysis, or manufacturing, production. You really learn the business as you go on. You don't need to get a business degree to do such a thing. And they really do, at least my company, I can speak on my behalf, they really do support your career development. I'm able to do something like this and talk to my alma mater and recruit people back here because they understand the need for young talent and developing them. I've only been at my company full-time for around 7 months. I've been able to see 3 sites, talk to people at a different site out in Maine, and really just understand and let your scientific curiosity kind of flourish, because your manager, hopefully your manager and your company really invests in your development and wants to really make sure that they're putting the time and money into making sure their employees are happy, and that their needs are being met too. There's all sorts of different evaluation processes that we have, and the conversation is very open, definitely among younger employees that I work with about, what we want to do, our career goals. Even the site leadership, they're asking constantly, how do we keep retaining talent? They even ask me directly for my career map. We have those conversations. So lots of good opportunities there. Whew, man, I'm talking so much. All right, so I've done 2 kind of different worlds of industry, and I'm currently in the manufacturing world. I'll start with R&D because that means research and development. I'm sure I've said it a bunch of times and I never explained it. Research and development, the research part is when you're really figuring out, okay, how do we better serve our customers? What's missing in the market? Where's the gap? How do we develop a molecule, develop a vaccine, develop a fermented product to move it forward into like an actual tablet or an injectable or something like that. So you're really making the determination early on, what's feasible, how do we move this forward, et cetera. So I have experience with that in my internship, and then as well as at Thermo. In my internship, I worked with CRISPR, virtually, not in person. I identified a different cell line. I had a different gene of interest that I wanted to knock in or knock out. These are really, I wouldn't say super technical, but, and then I created a different procedure to perform the necessary experiment. So a lot of it was literature analysis, figuring out like what's already been done and what can be done, and how do we experiment with that knowledge. So that's kind of what the gist of my research was, a little bit of bioinformatics as well, and then kind of conceptualizing and putting together different sort of assays and data analysis that would analyze, like, is this going to be successful? If it wasn't, how do we go back and try something else? So that's what a lot of R&D is, a lot of trial and error. It's kind of very similar to academia. You're doing a lot of, maybe it's redundant, but you're trying to gain an understanding of what's happening at a molecular level. When you get into the development stage, that's when you already found your targets and you're trying to formulate them properly, understand their potency, make it a druggable product so that the manufacturing sites are able to, you know, package it properly, move it down a packaging line, et cetera, or ferment it properly. So I only have real experience with the early research sort of phase, the development, not as much. When I was at Thermo Fisher, I worked with viral vector manufacturing. So that was specifically for gene therapy. So the clients that would come to our site were looking for getting into the gene therapy space. So they saw that, you know, a certain patient population has a genetic defect. They identified the gene that's responsible for it. And they may have asked our company at the time to manufacture the gene of interest in the viral vector, make sure that can get delivered into the patient, release the gene of interest, and then code the protein that would be responsible for fixing that kind of genetic defect. So you kind of use viruses in a good way. So it's pretty cool. I got to look at different type of nucleic acid like PCR. I'm sure we're all familiar with PCR, and different protein-based assays like ELISAs to analyze, like, is this viral vector actually performing as a delivery mechanism? Is the gene of interest there? Are we producing copies of the virus, et cetera? So that was pretty cool. And we got to work with, it was a kind of a client-facing role. So I did get to work with, you know, some of the clients directly and say, okay, you want to perform this type of assay, we'll need to order these reagents. This is what our capability is like. We'll have the results to you by whatever day. So it was a really exciting experience. I definitely learned a lot and would have continued to learn a lot if Alanco didn't come back with a full-time opportunity. So that's kind of the gist of R&D. Manufacturing is a whole different story. That's when you already have, you know, the drugs themselves, products themselves are already approved by FDA, Center for Veterinary Medicine, the appropriate governing body have already approved these products for manufacturing. So all you do at this point is the product is essentially made, and all you're doing is either packaging the product, or in my case, I'm supporting fermentation. So we have a bacterial organism. I'll show some slides on this later. A bacterial organism comes in a vial. We scale up the production of it, add some raw materials in, some nutrients, make the organism really, really happy, and then it goes through an anaerobic fermentation phase where it produces an ionophore. That's our active pharmaceutical ingredient, aka the product that we sell that's causing or preventing coccidiosis in our case. And then we scale up the production to 200,000 liter fermenters, put in a bunch of raw materials, et cetera, and move forward in processing and packaging the actual end product and selling it to the customer. So I support the fermentation and product recovery, which is 2 out of the 3 steps in that fermentation kind of process flow, and making sure, you know, if there's any changes or deviations from our standard procedures, that it's not impacting our product quality. Making sure what we're selling is exactly what we're giving to the customer. Yeah, so that's that. How am I doing? Okay, nice. So there's a bunch of different kind of areas within R&D. I've kind of alluded to them a little bit so far. Within R&D, you have the discovery research area. Like I said, really, really early, you're figuring out from the molecular standpoint, what can we do? What are our capabilities? Then in technical development, the discovery has kind of been made, and we're now trying to develop a molecule, a vaccine, a bacterial organism, further formulate it and move it to a state where it's ready to be, tested in clinical trials, I believe, and then moved on to manufacturing. Then you have the regulatory kind of involvement. So people who interact directly with the regulatory agencies, maybe deal with adverse events, maybe deal with, what are the limitations on, if we change the potency of something, or if we're trying to add a new excipient, which is like another, maybe another active raw material or something. That sort of kind of component is regulatory. In R&D, there's lots of trial and error. You aren't as like FDA regulated, or there's no good manufacturing or good documentation practices required in R&D, because you're still figuring out, how do I even bring this idea to conceptualization? So there's a lot of flexibility in that sense. There's clinical trials. It's at a much smaller scale. So like I talked about earlier, like I deal with 200,000 liter fermenters. They deal with like things under the microscope. So much different scale, generally. There's a lot of reliance on academia and literature results that'll usually govern, okay, this was possible by these scientists. Is this something that we could do, and make an actual product out of it? In manufacturing, there's scientists as well. They just play a different role in the process. The process has already been established for years at this point. How do we make improvements to it? How do we increase our productivity of our organism? Could we adjust the temperature? Could we adjust the pH, other different process parameters, running plant trials, et cetera. So work of the technical services division. A lot of the people I work with are in that division. A lot of chemists, chemical engineers, microbiologists, et cetera. Quality control is a very important part of the process too. We make all these commitments to the regulatory agencies about our specifications on our product. The quality control lab runs all sorts of assays every month to make sure that, what we're saying we're selling, again, is what we are testing and seeing those results in-house. So, we look at HPLC data. They look at like particle size, fineness, et cetera. Some of the parameters set forward by like the FDA when we're registering products. They want to see these results before they're sold to the customer. So the products are already in the pipeline. A lot of the science is to optimize production and meet specification. It is a pretty large scale, so at least on the fermentation side, like I said, 200,000 liter fermenters, huge evaporators. I'll get into the pictures and all that fun stuff as we move forward. But it's kind of the end. This is the packaged product before it goes out on trucks, out to the customer. So the scale up is pretty huge at this point. We're talking about big forklift trucks, moving products into trucks and this and that before it gets shipped away. And our plant site, at least the one I work at, is regulated by the FDA and the Department of Homeland Security. So it is a very controlled process. The FDA can come in at any time and do an inspection on us and, say, okay, you're meeting your standards, good job. Or, maybe you need to fix this part of your production process. We're going to give you a letter or whatnot. So, generally when the FDA comes in, evaluates different companies, they go to their manufacturing sites, because that is really where the product is really made and sent off. The final step before it's sent to customers. This looks like a lot. I'll try and get through real quickly. This is just generally what my day-to-day kind of looks like. The whole idea, of me as a quality assurance representative supporting fermentation recovery is really evaluating change controls, deviations, and process improvement initiatives. So deviations, we have our set standard procedures. These are our internal measures to make sure that we don't move forward in processing if something catastrophic might happen. And I really evaluate based on what might have happened. There might have been a leaking something, or there might have been an absurdly high temperature excursion. Is that going to impact our product quality? And if so, what sort of systems do we have in place to make sure we can still sell the product at the end of the day? Or do we just discard the product? Change controls, these are like kind of industry terms that you'll see frequently if this is something you decide to do. Change controls are really just changing an established parameter of our process and understanding the impact on our product quality as well. You know, engineers provide their input, tech service provides their input, environmental individuals provide their input, safety individuals provide their input on any sort of big changes that we want to make around our plant site, whether that's in my group or within other groups on site. So these are some of the questions that would kind of go through my head as I'm looking at someone's workflow and what they want to change. Then you have process improvement initiatives, which is the whole idea of like Six Sigma and Lean, which are common like practices for really just process improvement in general. You know, if we're seeing a lot of the same issue come up a million different times, what can we do to fix that? Is that something that's wrong with our employees? Do we need to do better training, or do we need to evaluate the process and see if this is a conversation worth having, something worth changing? So those are the kind of the different responsibilities that I have, but you don't have to read all of this. I just put it all on paper. Why Alanco? So these are the biggest things for me. And I was thinking about my options in industry and really what I gained out of my internship that allowed me to realize, okay, I really like industry and I really like this company and their potential for me. So the innovation is there. There is so much science on a day-to-day basis. Even if you're not directly working with science, science is the core of everything that we do, and innovation is the core of everything that we do. We're always trying to improve, you know, our products, our processes, happiness of our people, and really, you know, we are selling products that are scientific advancement, scientific innovation. So I like that component of it. The development opportunities are phenomenal. Like I said, I've gone to go in 7 months, all sorts of places, done all sorts of exciting things. And my manager directly, she is supportive of any development opportunity. You know, we have days off where my young professionals group, we got to go to an amusement park. We're able to go on a fermentation brewery tour coming up soon. Really, the company wants to retain young talent that's high performing, and they'll do whatever they have to do really to make sure that like we're happy and they're supporting us as young professionals growing up and figuring it out. So I am very grateful for that too. There's a lot of applicability with the major that I have, and I'm sure with all of your majors too. Like people tell me all the time, like if you can communicate science effectively to people who don't know science, you can tell a good story, you can do whatever you want in life. Like really, that's what it comes down to. People I work with who have that science background, who work in finance or who work in marketing, you're really able to tell a good story because you understand what the scientists are doing. And you can tell investors, et cetera, what's really kind of going on. And that's really a valuable skill. Technical communication is a very valuable skill, and I'm constantly trying to improve that and work on that. Amazing benefits. I'm a salaried employee. I got a relocation package to move me from Florida all the way to Indiana. I get vacation time, like 5 weeks of vacation. You get a 401k match for your retirement savings, health insurance. They take you on trips all the time. Like this whole trip that I'm on right now, basically free because they're paying for it. There's just a lot of things that really everyone who works there values a lot. You know, paternity leave, maternity leave, all of that good stuff that you can imagine. Definitely have job security, I would say. And then I understand the business of the life sciences industry and a pharmaceutical company, and that's pretty valuable knowledge. If I ever want to become an external consultant, I'd understand kind of the inner workings of how the business operates. So I don't know that much, but I'm definitely on my way to learning a lot, just being in it and communicating with people from all different backgrounds and areas. So that's my career goal. This is up to change. Subject to change. Someone asked me this the other day, so I had to scramble and put this together. Right now, what I'm thinking of and how I want to continue to develop in my career would be to become a global microbiology or fermentation advisor. So to be able to go to different sites that are a company understand their microbiology, their fermentation process, and really be able to provide guidance, technical knowledge, et cetera, and support maybe new products that might be fermented or microbiome related projects. Kind of be that liaison in between the R&D world and the manufacturing world. That's why I open up to questions to anybody. Yeah, let's go with you first. You're good. Do you want the microphone or you just want to go for it? Okay.
So like, given the pretty wide variety of roles and ethical stances that a lot of companies take, do you have any recommendations for finding those companies that align with your own beliefs?
Yeah, I would definitely understand how they're, ask them about their R&D practices and their clinical trial works, because for me, I'm not as familiar with how like our clinical trials are run, and because when you are developing a new product that's going to become an eventual product, you want to test at the small scale like we do with the vaccines. You're testing with a small population, seeing the success that way, and then moving it up along the line if it is successful. I think opening up that conversation really would be look at the clinical trial data, and I would look at the FDA.gov, honestly, off the bat. There's honestly a clinical trial database too, so you can really analyze the data that way, or even talk to research scientists specifically. They might not be able to tell you too much, but they may be able to understand, or regulatory, people who work in regulatory at different companies, and understand what are the processes and the checks in place to make sure that we're following ethical practices. Because I'm not as familiar, I don't work in that sector that much, but there is a ton of publicly available information that you're able to look and see, okay, they saw this many deaths from this process. There was actually an 80% success rate, so that's kind of why it went on. You'll be able to see those numbers that some companies might not provide like right off the bat when they announce a new product. Yeah.
From day to day, like what are you in the lab more so, or are you like going around?
I am not in the lab at all anymore. So I'm in a quality assurance kind of role. Quality control would be kind of in the lab almost every day. We also hire like shift working technicians as well as operators. So they work, from like 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. or like on a different schedule. So my day to day is usually at my cubicle, either on meetings, looking at documentation, or out on the production floors that I support. So that fermentation and recovery process, they have their own buildings, and they have the people who work on those processes kind of sitting in those buildings. So I sometimes have to go out and inspect the areas, make sure everything's clean and food safe. And if they're trying to show me something that they're actually trying to change, instead of, hearing about it, visually seeing actually what's going on, what's changing, or what might be causing a problem definitely aids me in my understanding. So that's generally my day-to-day. I sit probably between 3 different buildings most days, which is kind of cool. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, guys. It was a lot of fun. I hope I didn't bore anybody, but I think there's a feedback form, so check out your phones and do that QR code thing, and make sure we support CURBS because they supported me. If you have any questions that maybe don't come to mind right away, feel free to take a picture of my email, and I'm happy to answer anything that might come up for you. Even internship, if you can't make it to career fair too, and you're interested in intern or full time, or even 2 years from now, that's totally fine as well. Be happy to help.